After 20 years of being a father, my cheating wife told me I wasn't invited to our daughter's wedding. Her real father will walk her down the aisle. I quietly nodded, but what happened next left them all in shock. The first punch to the gut wasn't the words. It was the silence that followed. A suffocating, bottomless silence that stretched between us, heavier than the years we had spent pretending. Rachel had always been good at this, timing her words like a sniper. She knew exactly when to pull the trigger, and she just had. I stood there, watching my daughter, twirl in front of the boutique mirror, the wedding dress cascading around her like something out of a goddamn fairy tale. She was smiling, lost in her own world, the way she had been when she was 5 years old, riding her first bike down the driveway, screaming with joy because she finally got it. Back then she fell a few times, but she got back up. And now, 20 years later, I was the one crashing to the pavement. Rachel stepped closer, just enough for her perfume to reach me, just enough for her voice to slice through my ribs. "You're not walking her down the aisle." My mind blanked. I exhaled slowly, trying to keep my voice steady. "Excuse me." Rachel's lips barely moved, but her words dripped like venom. "Mark will be walking her down. Her real father." The boutique seemed to tilt. I gripped the back of a nearby chair, steadying myself as a laugh sharp, disbelieving almost escaped my throat. "Rachel, what the hell are you talking about?" She tilted her head, examining me like I was some slow student who just wasn't getting it. "It's time, Daniel. You've played your role, and we appreciate it. But this is what's best for Emily." Best for Emily? My pulse pounded. My mouth went dry. I should have seen this coming. The warning signs had been everywhere, subtle at first, then bolder, louder. The way Rachel had gradually started pushing me to the edges of wedding planning. The way Mark had begun showing up more, his presence bleeding into places he didn't belong. The way Emily, my little girl, had been conditioned, trained to see something I wasn't ready to face. I had been blind. Rachel reached into her purse, her movements practiced, elegant. When she pulled out a small black envelope, she didn't hand it to me. She just held it up between two fingers, the way you'd hold a piece of trash before tossing it away. "Here," she said smoothly. "The official invitation. It should clear up any confusion." I didn't move. I just stared at it. I had helped pay for this wedding. I had raised this girl. And now she was sending me a fucking invitation? Rachel sighed, her patience wearing thin. "You'll have a great seat. A guest seat." Something inside me snapped so quietly, so effortlessly, that even I barely noticed it. I took the envelope, my fingers pressing into the thick cardstock as I opened it. My name was there, printed neatly, formally, distantly. Daniel Carter. Underneath, the words, "Guest of the bride." Not father of the bride. Not even family. Just guest. Rachel must have seen something shift in my face because her expression flickered just for a second. A smirk tried to form, but I caught something underneath it. A hesitation, a flicker of something she wasn't ready to name. Fear. She thought she had checkmated me. That I'd nod, grit my teeth, and swallow this like every other quiet humiliation she'd dealt me over the years. She didn't realize I had already stepped off the board. I nodded. Slowly. Quietly. "All right," I murmured. Rachel blinked. That wasn't the reaction she expected. Her smirk twitched, her fingers tightening around her purse. "Good," she said smoothly. "I knew you'd understand." I smiled. Not the kind of smile that reached my eyes. Not the kind of smile that meant forgiveness. The kind of smile that hides a match before it's struck. She didn't know. She didn't know that the second she walked away, I was going to start pulling every thread. She didn't know that she had just made the biggest mistake of her life. The garage had always been my sanctuary, a place of order, a place where things made sense. When the world inside the house felt like a slow-burning wreck, I could come here, tinker with the old Chevy, organize my tools, drown in the quiet of normalcy. But tonight, the garage wasn't quiet. It was breathing. The wind rattled against the door. The fluorescent light flickered once. And then, just as I was about to shut the place down for the night, my foot kicked against something. A box. One of Rachel's old storage bins, half covered in dust and wedged behind a shelf, like it had been shoved there in a hurry. At first, I almost ignored it. Another relic from our past life. From the days when our marriage still held the illusion of stability. But then I saw it. The corner of a folder sticking out, peeking at me like some kind of dirty little secret. I crouched, pulling it free, and something in my gut twisted. It wasn't just any folder. It was black, worn at the edges, and I recognized the neat handwriting on the tab instantly. Rachel's. I opened it. The first thing I saw was a stack of letters, yellowed slightly with time. The ink smudged in places, but the words were still clear as day. Emily must never know. She has to believe Mark is her father. It's safer this way. Daniel is too stupid to figure it out. The world stopped. Everything around me, the tools, the car, the wind, ceased to exist. My eyes locked onto that last line. That one cruelly casual sentence that pulled the ground right out from under me. Too stupid to figure it out. I stared at it for so long that the letters started to blur, the ink bleeding into itself. And then slowly, carefully, I exhaled. Cold. That was the only way to describe it, the way the heat drained from my body, the way my pulse steadied into something frighteningly calm. I flipped through the pages, letter after letter. Plans. Conversations. Instructions. Rachel, guiding Mark like a puppet master. A carefully constructed narrative, years in the making, weaving a lie so deep that even I had believed it. Too stupid to figure it out. A slow, humorless chuckle bubbled up from my throat. They thought I was an idiot. They thought I was some blind, pathetic fool who had spent 20 years raising a daughter that wasn't mine, pouring my love, my time, my life into a lie. They thought I would just sit back and take it. Rachel had always been calculating, but she had made one mistake. She had underestimated me. My fingers tightened around the folder, knuckles pressing into the paper. She thought she had already won. But this wasn't the end of the game. This was just the beginning. The nurse smiled as she swabbed the inside of my cheek. "Routine health check?" she asked, jotting something down on her clipboard. I nodded. Yeah. Just covering all my bases. She didn't question it. Why would she? I was a 60-year-old firefighter. People expected us to be paranoid about our health. Smoke inhalation, stress, the job, it wears you down. Nobody bats an eye when a guy like me orders a test. But this wasn't about my health. This was war. I walked out of the clinic with the test kit sealed and labeled, my hands steady, my heartbeat eerily calm. I'd mailed it out within the hour. Now all I had to do was wait and dig. That night, while Rachel was out at her bachelorette circus with Emily and her bridesmaids, I went back into the garage, not to fix the car, not to escape. To finish what I started. I had spent 20 years believing a lie. Believing that I was Emily's father by blood. But those letters? They had shoved me into an abyss. One where every memory I cherished had been laced with manipulation. But if there was one thing that I could still control, it was the truth. I pulled the heavy metal storage chest from the back of the garage, the one I hadn't touched in years, just billowed up as I flipped it open, rifling through old tax records, house deeds, pay stubs. Where the hell was it? And then I found it. A thick envelope, yellowed at the edges, sealed with a paper clip. My name scrawled across it in legal handwriting. I opened it and let the papers spill out into my hands, and my whole world tilted. The adoption decree, signed, dated, finalized in 02/2003. I felt my pulse hammering in my throat as I scanned the lines. Petitioner, Daniel Carter. Minor, Emily Carter, formerly Emily Sinclair. Parental rights, Rachel Sinclair relinquished partial guardianship upon marriage to petitioner. No other paternal claims filed or recognized by the state. I read it again and again, then I laughed. A sharp, bitter laugh that cut through the suffocating silence of the garage. Rachel had spent years crafting her lie, convincing Mark, convincing Emily, convincing herself that she had full control over who was and wasn't her father. But she had forgotten something. Forgotten that I'd gone through every legal step to make Emily mine when she was a child. I wasn't just some stepfather. I wasn't just a placeholder. I was, in the eyes of the law, the only father that mattered. Rachel's whole scheme, the grand performance, the invitation labeling me as a guest, the smug satisfaction in her voice when she told me I wasn't walking Emily down the aisle. It was all built on sand. Because no matter what Rachel or Mark believed, no matter what lies they had whispered into Emily's ear over the years, I was still her father. And now it was only a matter of time before they realized it. I gathered the papers, tucking them into a secure file. Then I picked up my phone, pulled up my email, and checked the status of the DNA test. Processing. Good. Because once I had everything in place, Rachel and Mark wouldn't even see it coming. I sat across from Greg in his dimly lit office, the old wooden desk between us covered in neatly stacked case files and half-empty coffee cups. The place smelled like burnt espresso, and legal battles won through sheer force of will. Greg had been a paramedic before he became a lawyer, a warhorse in both fields, the kind of guy who had seen too many people die on the pavement and too many bastards walk away free in the courtroom. Now, in his 60s, he didn't waste time on pleasantries. He skimmed the adoption papers I had placed in front of him, his sharp eyes moving quickly over the text. When he finally looked up, his lips pulled into something that wasn't quite a smile. More like the kind of expression a man makes when he's about to watch someone else walk into a legal buzzsaw. "Well," he said, leaning back in his chair. "This is going to be fun." I exhaled, my grip tightening around the arms of the chair. "I need you to spell it out for me, Greg. I need to know exactly where I stand." He tossed the papers onto his desk. "Where you stand?" He scoffed, shaking his head. "Daniel, you're sitting on a goddamn throne, and Rachel doesn't even know it yet." I felt my pulse hammering in my ears. "So what? This adoption makes you the only legal father Emily has." He tapped the papers for emphasis. "Even if Mark's DNA test comes back as a match, it doesn't mean jack shit in court. Biology stopped matching the second this adoption was finalized. The law only recognizes you as Emily's father." Something hot and ugly coiled in my chest. Then how the hell was Rachel planning to get away with this? My voice came out sharp, edged with something dangerous. Greg smirked. "She was counting on you being a sucker." I clenched my jaw. "She figured you'd roll over," he continued, casually flipping through the documents. "She thought you'd sulk, maybe drink a little too much at the reception, and then just fade out of the picture. Let Mark slide into your place." I let out a slow, measured breath. "And legally?" Greg's eyes darkened with something almost amused. "Legally, Mark is about as important to Emily's life as the mailman. He has zero parental rights. He could show up to that wedding in a damn superhero cape, call himself Superdad in front of all the guests, and it wouldn't change a damn thing." I sat back, staring at the ceiling, trying to process it all. 20 years. 20 years I had spent raising my daughter, loving her, protecting her, while Rachel had been quietly rewriting the story behind my back. And all this time, she thought she had control. She thought she could erase me. But she had built her house of lies on a foundation she had long since forgotten about. I wasn't just Emily's father. I was her only father. Greg tapped the desk, bringing me back. "So, what's the play, Danny?" I met his gaze. Rachel thought she had already won. Mark probably thought he had secured his moment of glory. Emily, God, Emily. She was caught in the middle, unknowingly being used like a pawn. I inhaled deeply. Let the rage settle into something sharper. Something colder. I straightened in my chair, voice calm, steady. "The play," I said. I smiled. "They don't even know they've already lost." I poured myself a glass of bourbon, letting the amber liquid swirl lazily in the glass. The ice clinked softly, the sound almost peaceful. Almost. Rachel sat across from me at the kitchen table, legs crossed, her manicured nails tapping against the wood in that rhythmic, calculated way she did when she was pretending to be patient. She had been watching me carefully, no doubt waiting for signs of a fight, waiting for some last pathetic attempt at rebellion. I had given her nothing. I had played my role. I had nodded along when she told me Mark would be walking Emily down the aisle. I had forced my shoulders to sag just a little when she mentioned how hard this was for everyone. I had let my silence be misread as surrender. And now? Now she was here to collect her next little victory. "I need the family jewelry back." She said it so smoothly, like it was just a natural request, not a demand, not a final insult wrapped in civility. I took a slow sip of bourbon, letting the burn sit on my tongue before swallowing. Emily's wedding jewelry had been in my family for generations. A set of antique gold pieces passed down from fathers to daughters. When Emily was born, I had taken them out of my mother's old chest and held them in my hands, feeling the weight of history, the responsibility. I had promised myself that one day, when the time was right, I'd place them in Emily's hands myself. Rachel had other ideas. I set my glass down with a soft thud. "All right." Her perfectly shaped brows lifted slightly. She hadn't expected that. "Good," she said smoothly, recovering fast. "I'll have them clean before the ceremony." I nodded, swirling the glass absent-mindedly, pretending to be deep in thought. "Yeah, makes sense." I saw it then, the shift in her posture. The way her fingers tightened slightly around the armrest of her chair. She thought she had finally broken me. That's what Rachel always wanted. Not just to win, but to see the moment her opponent folded. I drained the rest of my bourbon, and stood up, stretching slightly, letting out a long exhale like a man who had finally accepted his fate. Then I turned toward the safe. She watched me like a hawk, her smugness barely concealed under that polished mask of indifference. I punched in the code, the lock clicked, and I pulled out a velvet-lined box. Rachel's eyes gleamed with satisfaction. I handed it to her, and she took it without hesitation, already imagining the scene. Mark slipping the bracelet onto Emily's wrist, fastening the necklace, placing the earrings as if they were his to give. I leaned against the counter, rubbing my jaw as she examined the box, her fingers ghosting over the surface. It took everything in me not to laugh, because here's what she didn't know. The jewelry? The real set? It wasn't in that box. It had been placed into a trust months ago. A trust that bore Emily's name, ensuring that no one, not Rachel, not Mark, not any future snake that slithered into their lives could touch them. Rachel thought she was holding victory in her hands. All she had was a worthless replica. I watched her closely as she stood, smoothing her dress, preparing to leave. And then just as she turned, just as she was about to walk out of my house with her stolen prize, I gave her one last gift. A tiny, almost imperceptible smirk. Her shoulders tensed just slightly. She hesitated. She felt it, the shift in the air. But she wouldn't figure it out. Not yet. Let her celebrate. Let her feel untouchable. Because when the truth came crashing down, when she realized just how badly she had miscalculated, that moment would be priceless. The church was packed. Guests murmured in hushed excitement, craning their necks as the music swelled. The grand oak doors at the back creaked open, and all eyes turned. Emily. She stood at the entrance, radiant in lace and soft candlelight, clutching a bouquet so tightly. But she wasn't nervous about the wedding. She wasn't nervous at all. She was just happy. Happy because she thought everything was exactly as it should be. Because Rachel had spent years whispering the right words in her ear, shaping the perfect narrative. Because Mark, standing beside her in a crisp tux, was the man she now believed to be her father. He offered her his arm with that same slimy confidence I had spent 2 decades tolerating. And she took it, smiling up at him, completely unaware of the truth. They walked step by step, closer to the altar, closer to the moment Rachel had been waiting for, the moment she could erase me from history like a stain she had finally scrubbed clean. I sat near the front, silent, still. But my pulse was steady because I knew what was coming. They reached the front of the church. The priest cleared his throat, preparing to begin, and then the lights cut out. A collective gasp rippled through the guests. The sudden darkness swallowed the murmurs, leaving only confusion. Then click. A soft thumb. A projector flickering to life. The massive white screen behind the altar meant to display childhood photos of Emily and Mark. The fairy tale slideshow Rachel had painstakingly prepared now showed something else. Something real. Rachel's face appeared first. Grainy, low-lit security footage. She was sitting across from a man in a cheap motel room. The officiant frowned. People shifted in their seats. Rachel's voice, tinny through the speakers, echoed through the church. Make it say, Mark's the father. I don't care what the real results are. The silence was deafening. Rachel shot up from her seat, eyes wild, lips parting too late. The video kept rolling. How much? $5. Cash. The camera caught the moment she slid the envelope across the table. Someone in the audience gasped. Rachel turned toward me, face contorted in fury. Turn that off. I leaned back in my seat, exhaling dramatically. Oh, I don't think we're done yet. The footage cut to another screen, a manila folder, a legal document displayed in crisp high resolution. Greg's voice, my lawyer, came through loud and clear. The law is simple. Daniel Carter is the only recognized legal parent of Emily Carter. Her adoption in 02-2003 nullifies any biological claim. Even if Mark Sinclair shares DNA, he has no parental rights. None. The guest started whispering loudly now. I looked over. Emily. Her face had lost all color. Her lips were parted in pure frozen disbelief. Mark? He had gone pale. Rachel? She looked like she wanted to rip the projector off the wall with her bare hands. I stood slowly, casually. Rachel's voice finally found its way out of her throat. You bastard. I raised a hand, silencing her like a schoolteacher shutting up a rowdy child. Now this is Emily's big day. Let's not make a scene. Mark's fists clenched. You son of a Mark. I sighed, shaking my head. I'd be more careful with that temper of yours. Wouldn't want to add assault to your list of upcoming legal troubles. Emily spun toward Rachel, eyes blazing. Tell me this isn't real. Rachel opened her mouth, closed it. She looked around as if searching for an escape hatch. The guests were no longer whispering. They were openly staring. I gave Rachel my best shit-eating grin. Then I turned to Emily, my voice steady, calm. Sweetheart, I said, would you like me to play it again? The church was no longer a place of peace. It was a battlefield. The murmurs had swelled into a full-blown uproar. Guests shifting uncomfortably in their seats, whispers turning into sharp, audible gasps. The video had shattered the illusion Rachel had spent 2 decades crafting, and now there was nothing left but the wreckage. I stepped forward, reaching into my jacket pocket as I slowly turned to face the crowd. Since some of you might still be confused, I said, voice carrying over the chaos, I thought I'd make things a little easier. I pulled out a neatly stacked bundle of papers, crisp and clean, and let them fall onto the first row of pews. The pages scattered like fallen leaves, tumbling into eager hands. Rachel's face twisted. What the hell are you doing? I smirked. Oh, just sharing some light reading. Guest grabbed the papers. I scanning the documents. Confusion quickly turning to shock. Legal adoption records, bank transfers, evidence, everything laid out in black and white. Proof that Emily had always been mine and that Rachel had been funneling money to Mark for years. The murmurs turned into outright shouting. Emily snatched a paper from a nearby guest, her hands trembling as she read. Rachel lunged forward, trying to grab it. Give me that. But Emily was already backing away, shaking her head in disbelief. You lied to me, she whispered, voice cracking. Then louder, you lied to me. Rachel held up her hands. Sweetheart, listen. It's not. Emily's whole body shook with fury. You stole my father from me. The words ripped through the church, silencing everything. Rachel flinched, her mask finally slipping, her desperation visible now. Mark, on the other hand, wasn't looking at Emily. He was looking at the guests, at the widening eyes and murmurs of disgust, at the realization that he wasn't just being exposed, he was being buried. And then the final nail in his coffin. A deep, authoritative voice cut through the noise. Mark Sinclair. The room turned. A sheriff stood at the entrance of the church, hand resting on his belt, a pair of cuffs gleaming at his side. Mark froze. The sheriff stepped forward, holding up a document. We have a warrant for your arrest, fraud, document tampering, and conspiracy to commit financial misconduct. Rachel whipped around. No, this isn't happening. Mark bolted. Or at least he tried to. He barely made it 3 steps before the sheriff's deputy grabbed him, twisting his arms behind his back and shoving him against the pew. A stunned hush settled over the guests as the sound of metal clicking shut echoed through the church. Mark thrashed. Rachel, do something. Rachel stumbled back, her face ashen. For the first time she realized there was nothing left to do. I exhaled, feeling the weight finally lift from my chest. Rachel turned to Emily, pleading, Sweetheart, please. Aya. Emily took a step back, then another. Her wedding dress, the one I had helped her pick, floated like a ghost around her feet. Her breath shallow, eyes filled with rage. Rachel reached out. Emily slapped her hand away. You disgust me. Rachel flinched like she'd been slapped. Mark was being hauled toward the entrance, still shouting. The guests didn't move. They just watched. And then Emily turned to me. Her father. Her real father. And she did the one thing I hadn't expected. She took my hand tightly, fiercely. And when she spoke, her voice wasn't shaking anymore. Walk me down the aisle. Rachel collapsed into a pew, sobbing. And I smiled. Cold. Controlled. Victorious. The silence after Rachel's collapse was deafening. The kind that stretches long enough to make people uncomfortable. Long enough for reality to set in like a slow, creeping poison. Emily stood frozen, her fingers still clutching mine. The weight of the moment hung between us. The years of deception unraveling in real time. Each revelation, a fresh wound. Then with a shaky breath, she let go. Her hands trembled as she reached up, fingers catching the delicate lace of her veil, the final piece of the illusion. And then, she ripped it off. Gasps rippled through the guests. But she didn't care. She wasn't looking at them. She was looking at me. The veil slipped from her fingers, crumpling onto the floor like a discarded lie. Her eyes, wide and filled with something raw. Anger, sadness, relief, searched my face. You, she whispered, voice barely holding steady. I swallowed. Then, Louder this time, stronger. You were always my dad. Rachel jerked upright, eyes wild with panic. Emily, no. Emily turned on her so fast that Rachel actually flinched. You lied to me, she spat. For years. Rachel's lips trembled. Sweetheart, I was protecting you. Emily let out a hollow laugh. From who? The man who raised me? Who was there for every scraped knee, every school recital, every damn thing? Rachel shook her head, reaching for her. Baby, please, you don't understand. Don't touch me. Rachel's hands dropped. Emily's breathing was sharp, uneven. And then, slowly, she turned away from her mother, away from the wreckage, and faced me again. Her shoulders squared. Her chin lifted. And then, in front of everyone, she took my arm. The collective gasp from the guests barely registered. The heat of Rachel's stare burned against my skin, but I didn't look at her. I only looked at Emily. Her fingers curled around my arm, a silent declaration. A choice. I felt my throat tighten, but I refused to break. I squeezed her hand gently, my voice low. Are you sure? Emily exhaled, then nodded. I've never been more sure of anything. Mark, still restrained at the back, snarled. This is bullshit. He's not your father. A shadow moved. Emily's fiancé. He stepped forward, slow and deliberate, placing himself directly in Mark's path. His voice was calm. Lethal. I think you're done talking. Mark's mouth opened, then snapped shut when Emily's fiancé didn't so much as blink. The sheriff behind him tightened the cuffs. Emily didn't even turn around. She lifted her chin, squared her shoulders, then whispered just loud enough for everyone to hear. He was always my father. Rachel let out a small, broken sob. Mark struggled. And me? I stood there, my daughter at my side, my spine straight, my heart full, and smiled. Because for the first time in 20 years I had one. Rachel sat stiffly in the courtroom, her perfectly tailored suit doing nothing to hide the way her hands gripped the table. The confidence she once wielded like a weapon was gone, replaced by something unfamiliar on her face, fear. Mark was beside her, wrist shackled, his lawyer whispering frantically in his ear. He wasn't listening. He was too busy glaring at the judge, at me, at the evidence stacked neatly on the table between us. The final reckoning had arrived. The judge adjusted her glasses, shuffling the papers in front of her with slow, deliberate movements. After reviewing the evidence, she began, her voice steady, unwavering. This court finds that Rachel Sinclair knowingly falsified DNA records and engaged in financial misconduct. As such, her claim to alimony is hereby denied, and her rights to any joint marital assets, including the primary residence, are revoked. Rachel gasped. The room stirred. A ripple of murmurs. Rachel shot up, panic bleeding into her voice. Your Honor, you don't understand. The judge barely looked at her. I understand plenty, Mrs. Sinclair. She turned a page. Furthermore, given the overwhelming proof of financial fraud between the defendants, the court is prepared to proceed with sentencing for Mr. Mark Sinclair. Mark jerked against his cuffs. This is insane. I was lied to too, she told me. The judge silenced him with a single look. Mr. Sinclair, you knowingly accepted falsified documents, participated in deception for financial gain, and attempted to claim parental rights where none existed. As such, the court finds you guilty of fraud, document forgery, and conspiracy. A beat of silence. Then you are hereby sentenced to 4 years in federal prison. Rachel let out a strangled sob. Mark's face drained of all color. No. And, oh, this is her fault. He turned toward Rachel, his voice dripping with betrayal. You promised me. Mark, shut up. Rachel hissed, voice cracking, but it was over. The bailiff stepped forward. The cuffs rattled as Mark was yanked to his feet, his protest cut off as he was dragged toward the door. Rachel barely breathed, hands shaking as she turned toward me, her eyes wide, desperate. I could see it, the last remnants of control slipping through her fingers like sand. You can't do this, she whispered, voice trembling. You can't just take everything from me. I stood slowly, buttoning my jacket, letting the silence stretch long enough for her to feel it. Then I leaned in, just enough for my words to reach her and no one else. I didn't take anything from you, Rachel, I murmured. You did that all by yourself. She opened her mouth, but no words came. The gavel came down. Case closed. Rachel collapsed back into her seat, eyes hollow. And I? I turned, walking out of that courtroom free. A week later the papers were signed. The house, Rachel's prized possession. The thing she had fought so hard to control was no longer hers. I didn't keep it, didn't sell it. Instead, I handed the deed over to the Chicago Children's Fund, turning it into a home for foster kids, the kind of place I wished had existed for me when I was young. Rachel found out through the news. I never checked to see where she ended up after that, because for the first time in 20 years I didn't care. The smell of barbecue filled the crisp autumn air as laughter rang out across the backyard of what used to be Rachel's house. Now a home for kids who had nowhere else to go. I stood near the grill, flipping burgers, watching as a group of kids ran across the lawn, dodging between tables, their faces smeared with frosting from the cake one of the guys had brought over from the station. This wasn't just another day. It was a celebration. The first of what would become a tradition, an annual gathering for the kids, a place where they could feel like they belonged. My firehouse crew had shown up in full force. Off-duty, relaxed, tossing footballs, telling stories, sneaking extra marshmallows to the younger ones when they thought no one was looking. Emily stood near the patio, watching it all, a soft smile on her face. She had been quiet these past few weeks, processing, healing. We both had. I still wasn't sure how much she had forgiven Rachel, or if she ever would. But she had made her choice that day in the church, and she had never looked back. As I pulled the last burger off the grill, she walked over, hands tucked behind her back. "Hey old man," she teased. "Got a second?" I smirked. "For you? Always." She pulled something from behind her back and held it out. A framed photograph. I took it carefully, my fingers brushing the edge of the glass. It was us. A picture from years ago. Emily, maybe 5 or 6, sitting on my shoulders, both of us grinning, faces smudged with ice cream. The words, etched into the bottom of the frame, made my throat tighten. My real hero. I swallowed hard, blinking against the sudden sting in my eyes. Emily bit her lip. "I figured you should have a reminder, not that you need one." I exhaled a soft chuckle, pulling her into a tight hug. "Thank you, kiddo." She squeezed back just as fiercely. Across town, in a dimly lit motel room, Rachel sat on the edge of a stiff, cheap mattress, staring blankly at the TV screen. The local news played a segment. Former firefighter turns old home into a foster center for children in need. The camera panned across the celebration, showing the backyard, the kids, the laughter. Then, me and Emily. Her holding the picture. Me hugging her. Rachel's fingers curled into the thin motel blanket. The news anchor's voice was warm. A true example of what fatherhood is really about. Love, not just blood. Rachel reached for the remote and shut the TV off. The screen went black. The room was silent. She was alone. Back at the party, Emily pulled back from our hug, wiping at her eyes. She glanced around at the kids, the firefighters, the life we had built from the wreckage of the past. Then she looked up at me, smiling softly. "Dad." "Yeah." She nodded toward the fire pit where the younger kids were roasting marshmallows. "Race you." I grinned. "You're on." The letter arrived on a cold November morning, tucked between utility bills and charity solicitations. A plain white envelope with no return address. But I knew the handwriting before I even opened it. "Rachel." I took my time. Poured a cup of coffee. Let the steam rise as I turned the envelope over in my hands. Then, finally, I slid my thumb under the seal and pulled out the letter. The handwriting was rushed. Messy. Desperate. "Daniel. Mark told me everything." I smirked. "Of course he did. I know you hate me. But you have to understand. I did what I thought was right for Emily. I wanted her to have the best life possible." I let out a slow breath, shaking my head. Even now she couldn't just admit it. She couldn't just say, "I lied. I manipulated. I destroyed. I'm alone, Daniel. I lost everything. And Emily, she won't even return my calls." That part made my chest tighten just for a moment. Because for all the hell Rachel had put us through, for all the pain and deception, she was still Emily's mother. And now, she had nothing. "Please. I just want to talk to my daughter. I deserve that. You know I do." Then the final line. "Give her back to me." My fingers clenched. I sat there for a long time staring at those words. Not "let me see her." Not "let me explain." Give her back to me. Like Emily was an object. A possession. Something to be handed over, traded, controlled. I exhaled sharply, folding the letter once, twice, pressing my thumb against the crease. Then without another thought, I stood, walked across the room, and opened the iron doors of the fireplace. The flames crackled, hungry and alive. I held the letter over them, watching as the edges curled, blackened, turned to embers. Rachel's last attempt at control burned to nothing. As the paper disintegrated, I murmured, almost to myself, "Ash makes the best soil for new beginnings." Then I shut the fireplace doors and walked away, leaving the past where it belonged. The air was crisp with the first hints of autumn, the golden light of the setting sun casting long shadows over the courtyard of the foster center. The place was alive, kids laughing, firefighters chatting, the scent of barbecue lingering from earlier in the afternoon. At the front of the gathering, Emily stood beside me, her hands clasped in front of her, her engagement ring catching the light. She had insisted on this moment, on the ceremony, and I knew why. It wasn't just about me. It was about what we had built from the wreckage. A black cloth covered the memorial plaque mounted beside the front doors. Emily took a deep breath, glancing at me. Her eyes filled with something warm, something steady. "Ready, Dad?" "Dad." A year ago, I had nearly lost that title. Now it was more solid than ever. I nodded. "Let's do it." Together, we pulled the cloth away. The polished bronze gleamed in the sunlight. The words carved deep into the metal. Carter Children's Center. Family is a choice, not just blood. A wave of emotion surged in my chest, but I held steady. The crowd erupted in applause, but my eyes stayed on the words. A choice. I had made mine. Emily had made hers. And Rachel had made hers too. I caught a glimpse of movement beyond the gate, near the sidewalk. A lone figure stood there, half hidden in the shadows. Rachel. She wasn't close enough to be seen by anyone else. She was just watching. Her hair was pulled into a tight knot, her coat too thin for the weather. She looked smaller than I remembered. Weaker. She hadn't sent another letter, hadn't called, but she was here. And when the kids' laughter rang out, when the sound of their joy filled the air, bouncing off the old bricks of the house she had once claimed as her own, Rachel flinched. I saw it. The way her lips parted just slightly. The way her shoulders tensed as if she had just been hit by something she hadn't expected. She stared at the plaque, reading the words. And then, without a word, she turned and walked away. Not a plea. Not a final attempt to control. Just gone. Emily exhaled beside me, squeezing my arm gently. "You okay?" I let out a slow breath, my gaze lingering on the spot where Rachel had stood. Then I smiled. Never better. The past was behind us. And in front of us? Everything else. Good luck. Take care.
After listening to today's story, perhaps it has raised some new questions in your mind, or maybe it has brought back some old memories. Every day on Reddit, new experiences and moments create fresh stories, and they connect all of us. Everyone has their own unique journey in life, and we all try to understand the world in our own way. These kinds of moments remind us that we are all human, sometimes happy, sometimes sad, and always learning something new. If you enjoyed this story, feel free to share it with your friends. Your thoughts and feedback are always valuable to us, as they motivate us to create even better content. Every story has its own unique angle, and our goal is to understand everyone's perspective and make our content diverse and relatable. Stories like these help us realize that life's journey is different for everyone, and by hearing other stories, we learn something new. You can also share your own stories with us. Your experiences are valuable to us as well, and if you enjoyed this video, please leave your feedback. We aim to create content that brightens your mind and gives you new ideas every time. If you've already seen this video before, your feedback is still important. With every piece of feedback, we can improve our content and bring a new perspective to our viewers. Today, what we saw was just a small part of the many stories shared on Reddit and across the world. It's a reminder of how we all try to understand life by sharing our experiences with each other. This video was only an example of how we try to connect with others through storytelling, learning about different sides of life. We hope to continue sharing such stories that help us all learn and grow together. Thank you for your time, and don't forget to keep an eye out for more stories coming soon. If you haven't already, please like and follow for more amazing content. Your support keeps us going, and we will strive to bring you more thought-provoking and heartwarming stories. Until next time, take care and stay curious. *.